Hello there. Welcome to this week's Inter-University Debate. This week we're discussing the US elections and its consequences on Africa. And joining me to discuss this very interesting conversation is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help us put perspective to the topic. And just before we started the show, there's already a heated debate. And I know we're going to have a very heated debate as well. So my name is Douglas Onen, and I'll be your host for this particular conversation. Thank you. So in no particular order, I'll begin from my extreme right. Just quickly introduce yourself to my immediate right, and then we start the conversation. You're most welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Onen. My name is Ginyera Orochi. I'm a law student in my fourth year at Makerere University. Thank you.
Your name is Ginyera
Orochi.
Hi, most welcome.
My pronunciation.
You're most welcome. The lady on the show.
Yes, my name is Preta Peace Namasaba, soon to be law graduate from Makerere University.
Yeah. Most welcome and happy to have you here. Mr. President, most welcome.
Thank you. Brian Aruho is my name, a finalist in law school at Cavendish University, Uganda.
Most welcome and very happy to have you here. So I'll start with the lady, without prejudice, Preta. Just before we started the conversation, your opinions and thoughts about, first of all, the race, but also the lady that was in the race, Kamala Harris, who was running against the current 47th President of United States of America, Donald Trump. You had and hold very high regards on the person of Kamala Harris. But just before we go into that, we'd just like to bring us up to the speed with the conversation, and then we get into your opinion about the race.
Thank you. Well, I was a Kamala supporter. I was a Kamala supporter before she even ran for president. I used to watch clips of her during her political speeches. You know, there were claims that she recycles her speeches and all of that. Yeah. But there's something that I noticed about Kamala in her speeches, is that she's really a joyful person. You know, she's optimistic about the future, about America, because she's a child of immigrants. And it was very, very fundamental to her campaign. She was like, I'm a child of immigrants. My mother came from India. My father was from Jamaica. And they raised us in a middle-class home. And look at me. I'm here now. I'm the first female black president, vice president of America. I'm the first black vice president of America. I'm the first South Asian vice president of America. So her campaign was one of hope. Her campaign was one of looking forward, of ensuring that the rights and freedoms that enabled not only her family, but her as, I don't want to get into identity, but I'm going to say it, but her as a black South Asian woman to rise to become vice president in the United States. Her campaign was all about those things. And I think if she had won, if the American people had supported her, it would be good for the globe.
Really?
For progression.
Really?
It would be good for social progression. It would be good for so many things. I shall get into that later.
All right. Since we're just talking about personalities, you've made mention about the personality of Kamala. I would like the gentleman, because I know Brian and George hold a view, and I know are very staunch supporters of Trump. Let's first speak personalities. She started to take us on that trend. Mr. President, what are your thoughts on the personality of the person, Donald Trump?
I think to begin with, it's the epitome of success. Yeah. See, when God was creating people, some people who were really created in favor. I think for a person like Donald Trump, to begin with, had his personality is just outgoing. Having a person whose interests are in business, I think one, for the whole slogan of Make America Great Again, he was indeed the biggest qualifier to push that. But then secondly, for what we term as a bully, when you go down to international relations, international law, diplomacy, and how these big states, the veto powers, play their game, I think again, that is a person who was again needed to put the whole slogan again of Make America Great Again to that perspective. But then also for, I think now, people who fall in the global south, he helped us understand, a few things. Our comrade here, before this debate, said that he termed us as shithole countries. which can be looked at from two different perspectives, from the perspective of yes and from the perspective of no, but of which the yes was holding more power. So I think he helped draw more light. We need people like that who will tell you the truth, because the truth is painful, but it helps you reshape. So in a nutshell, I think he's a person to really look up to.
All right. George, personalities. We shall get into the nitty-gritties of the debate. I just wanted to describe for you the person in Donald Trump.
Yes, I think I'll begin from where H.E. Aruho has stopped. And I think I agree entirely with what he has said. And I think the person of Donald Trump, and one of the attributes that I like most about him, as a very committed supporter, persons have called me a fanatic actually, and I've gotten to believe over time that actually, like I told my comrade here, Council, that Donald Trump is actually not a person, it's an idea that persons have continued and relentlessly believed in. It's an idea of resistance, it's an idea of revival, and it's an idea, like H.E. said, of making America great again. And I think, in fact, making the world great again, because America is a superpower, albeit the biggest power in the world, and its internal affairs are actually our affairs. That's why the election was closely followed. So Trump, as a person, his persona, from his success in business and all these other things, I think as a young man, those are certain attributes that I would look up to, regardless of his faults. Like any other human, there are faults on either side of the aisle. Even Kamala is not the cleanest person in the world. So I think attributing Donald Trump to all his failures, like I know she's going to do in the rebuttal, may not be something we should look up to. But his persona as a strong man, as a successful man, very wealthy man, and a person who has gone to those great lengths, I think puts him at a very inspirational level on my part.
All right. Preta, now that we have laid a playing field for the personalities and we know the kind of people that we're talking about, the conversation today is the implication of that particular election that happened on 4th and 5th of November that saw the victory of Donald Trump take over as the 47th president of the United States of America. Trump's manifesto rode on a number of issues, but particularly I'm going to cite out 5. We're going to look at the immigration policy, the tax policy, among others. But let's now, our interest as Africa is on those consequences that it will have on the continent. As a Kamala supporter, I know you'd have your own views, but let us look at what are the consequences that this particular election and the win for Donald Trump presents to our continent, Africa.
Okay. To begin with, I disagree with the characterization that both these gentlemen have given.
Definitely had to.
The fact that he's a successful businessman, I mean, his father was a millionaire. He has had 4 bankruptcies. But that's neither here or there. I think if we want to understand the impact of a Trump presidency, we need to understand what does the phrase "Make America Great Again" mean. And I'm going to ask both of them now, then I can proceed. What does "Make America Great Again" mean to you?
I remember you asked this actually even before the show, and I told you, and actually gave me some information about where it actually started from. But I think the idea of making America great again, and the good thing with Trump is that he has been here before. This is actually his second term. There are things that you can benchmark from what he did in his first term,
Definitely,
and actually reproduce them in this one, in the second term. So the idea of making America great, it's a realistic, pragmatic idea that America first. Actually, those are one of the key tenets to the making America great again. That in everything that we do, we're going to make America what? America first. In as regards to the economy, in as regards to security, in as regards to health, and in everything we are going to do.
It would be the same.
It would be the same. So, the Trump presidency posits America as first.
Yes.
So, it would seem to be that America is first, and all these other things
a secondary.
come, as secondary, which is okay.
Yes.
But America has positioned itself as, the world superpower.
Yes.
It is the world leader. And I'm going to take us back to 1939, the beginning of World War II. In World War II, 1 million Africans fought in the war. 500,000 of those were on the British side. Many people got killed, they were not paid, and all of that. All that goes to show that, these foreign policies, these foreign wars affect us as Africans in ways that at this moment we might not comprehend, but maybe next year or 2 years from now, we might come to see. Of course, the epicenter of power has moved away from Europe, and it's now in Washington. So what does making America great again mean in terms of Washington? As I told George earlier, the phrase "make America great again" was used in the Ronald Reagan presidency in 1980. For him, he was like, let's make America great again. But ever since America became a world superpower, it has been known for its interference. Whenever there is a conflict, a geopolitical conflict, you'll be sure to find that America is involved somehow. They'll be sponsoring the war, they'll be giving ammunition, they'll be even sending troops. We can see it in Ukraine, we can see it in Gaza, in Somalia. There is always American influence. And I'm going to present two arguments. Most Trump supporters believe that he presents an idea of non-interference, that Trump is going to let African countries be African countries. He's going to let us do our own thing. But at the same time, they're like, Trump is so strong, he's going to stop the war in Ukraine. He is going to stop the war in Gaza.
But hasn't he already just 24 hours into office? We saw troops troops were withdrawn.
That debate
so those are two conflicting views. Is he stopping wars or is he not interfering? And to speak about stopping wars, I'm going to talk about a war or an invasion that America stopped in the recent past. As you all know, America withdrew its troops from Afghanistan in 2021. And I don't know if this has been in the media you consume, but the rights of women have been really pulled back so badly. Yeah. It is now compulsory to wear the niqab. The niqab covers your nose, your eyes, everything. It doesn't show the female form. Women can no longer go to school. It is even illegal for women to laugh or sing in the streets in the presence of men. That has been the cost of America pulling away. Of course, they invaded them like 2 decades ago.
Just allow me to interject on that particular issue. Yes. Every state has the way it runs its country. Yes. And we know for the Middle Eastern countries or for the Arab world, they run or ride on principles of religion, particularly the Islam, that presents us with what their forms and beliefs are. And that is why when the troops of America withdrew, they had to reinstate what they believe in and what they know. Yes. And that has been the norm for them.
I'm going to give you...
How does that affect?
I'm going to give you an example of, let's say, Uganda. Let's say Uganda.
And whose presidency did?
It was during Biden's presidency, yes.
A Democrat
but
president.
Already Trump had signed the treaty to remove the troops. So it was just an action by the administration to go through with what Trump had already done. It was his signature saying, we're withdrawing American and NATO troops from Afghanistan. Yes. So in Uganda, we all know that Ugandans are anti-homosexuality. It's a common sentiment. Opposition, Museveni regime, everyone is like, we hate gay people, we should outlaw it, etc. Yeah. But we have seen the reports of, conservative religious groups, injecting money into Uganda to drive this propaganda. Yes, as Ugandans already hate gays, but then they give us some more money to hate gays. And of course, what we got in that was the Anti-Homosexuality Act. That's what we got from it. So
and what was the ripple effect of that? What was the ripple effect of that?
The American dollar resulted into that repressive law. Same goes for Afghanistan. The American troops went there. They said, we are going to save women's rights in Afghanistan. They are being suppressed. They went there, I think, between 1998 and 2001. And then after 20 years, they're like, we're tired of this, so let's leave.
But Preta, do you know how many raids, do you know how many families have been disintegrated and killed by those troops that were in Afghanistan? Are you aware of the numbers?
But there were freedoms, there were rights.
And the question, are you aware of the numbers of the people that lost their lives by the raids that happened by the troops?
I think the number was between 200,000 and 300,000.
And those are lives of innocent Afghanistans who are claimed that they were terrorists.
Yes.
Okay.
It's the price of interference. But so I'm going to the Trump presidency. You know, it has those two things. Is he interfering, or does he have the power?
And that is why he withdrew the troops, because he didn't want to interfere and let the leadership of Afghanistan rule their people.
Meaning he left it worse than than they found it under the Clinton presidency.
Anyway, make your argument.
So I'm going to use that analogy of Afghanistan in Gaza. We already know his sentence about Gaza. He said Israel should finish the job. I don't know what that means. Maybe it means killing more Palestinians.
But Biden administration has also been about that.
Yes. But if they say they should kill more Palestinians,
but saying it and acting, have they acted any different in Gaza? What is the policy about Gaza?
There's a difference between being
guns?
neutral and being an agitator for a genocide.
Neutral how when you keep on supplying guns to Israel?
But if they say that they should continue killing Palestinians?
But by giving them arms, you're literally saying the same thing. So when Trump comes and says the same thing, does it
the arms are being sold by private contractors.
But did France put an embargo on arms? Has America done that? Did the Kamala administration and Biden, did they do that?
It's what? Business.
Yes. It's on both sides. It's on both sides. It is to Kamala, because even if we had the Kamala presidency, all these things were going to continue as they are continuing.
But that isn't the question. The question
but what are you trying to
is
say?
there interference or is there non-interference? Which is it? I want you to choose a side. Is the Trump presidency about going into other countries?
When Preta was opening her remarks, she mentioned that Trump supporters believe that these are how things are. You gave two scenarios, and then that onset, I wanted to ask myself: is that what they believe? Is it what is rooted in actually the Trump campaign? Or are those the sentiments that are rooted even in the campaign? Because us as supporters, we have a tendency of making illusions of ourselves. So when you mentioned that this is what Trump people believe, is it what he actually also believes?
So
non-interference?
You would like to differentiate Christians from Christ and Muslims from Muhammad.
But even here in Uganda, I've seen people distancing acts committed by their fans or supporters. We've seen political parties distancing themselves from that. So I think it would be, in a sense, unfair for us, for funds
to attribute
on what funds are holding out to Donald Trump.
So the supporters are not clear on what the movement, as you call it, is about?
Not all of them. I believe not all of them, and even some may
But you as a supporter, what is your opinion on that? Interference or non-interference?
As a supporter?
Yes.
As a supporter, like you mentioned yourself, America is a superpower, and there's need. It's a police of the world. There's need to actually interfere.
So you're going both sides?
No, I'm not going both sides. There's need to interfere. But I say
all right, Preta, as you sum up, and then I get to George.
Well, in my next speech, I've talked for so long. I'm going to talk about what the price of non-interference means for Africa in terms of health, education, and generally our geopolitical climate.
All right.
I think we should interrogate it further, non-interference. Because even in Trump's first presidency, he actually interfered. Is there a time he didn't interfere? In Nigeria, he did. Under the Obama's presidency, they denied arms to the Nigerian government to fight Boko Haram. It's Trump who actually did it.
Yes, but under the Obama presidency, they also killed Gaddafi. That's interference.
That's interference.
So
I'm failing to get the argument. What do you want Trump to do? Do you want him to interfere or not interfere?
No,
yes.
I'm asking you, what is he going to do? Is he going to he's going to interfere?
Yes.
And interfering in other countries' politics involves making America great again?
Yeah. The idea of making America great
putting
again.
America first?
Maybe
what is interference to you? Maybe to begin with, what is interference?
Interference is, for example, during Biden's regime, we passed the Anti-Homosexuality Act, and we're like, yes,
sanctions.
we are repealing our aid in terms of PEPFAR and all other such things.
And then
That's
we're
interference.
also
But like
removing,
that-
we're also
those are
suspending
the
you from
small
AGOA,
interferences.
and it's still interference.
Yeah, those
There's nothing like small or big.
But
It's
like
still
almost on
interference.
a big scale.
If a sovereign state like Uganda
Yes.
goes ahead and passes a law with the majority of
Yes.
Ugandans agreeing to it and
Yes.
saying
Yes.
no to this particular act,
Yes.
and you go ahead and have a ripple effect of saying, you know what, we are suspending you from AGOA,
Yes.
knowing
That is huge.
knowing
Huge.
the amount of goods we transport
Yes.
through AGOA.
Yes.
Yeah, going ahead to cut AIDS, particularly for people suffering from HIV stroke AIDS, and all, isn't that interference?
That's interference.
I
But I
think-
want to talk about the price of non-interference.
Yeah, but then before you
In
go,
these shithole
before you go,
countries,
before you go to the
of course.
price of whatever your debate is going to
Yes.
go to, the price of non-interference, you need to know that when you're looking at interference, especially on the global level, you look at it from both aspects. That there is positive interference and there is negative interference. Both levels have effects. Yes. So you need to know. I mean, as he said, during the Boko Haram interference, it was for the good. It wasn't for the bad. When we had the interference when you're saying that the troops moved out and then women went back, the society was going back to where they were before.
No, it wasn't.
Come
We were
on,
more progressive
it's simple
in
history.
1998.
It's simple history.
We can research it.
Please, please.
Afghanistan was more
Please
progressive
do
in
it.
1998.
But what is
Same goes for
what is your idea of progress?
you're-
What's the idea of progression? Is it that idea of progression that we look at? Okay, women's rights are being respected, or this, and that's your idea of progression.
Yes.
Because
But
the
people
societies of Afghanistan then, how they were progressing, was entirely dependent on its
On them.
people.
Because he has given you a clear example. When Uganda came out and put its stand on the anti-homosexuality law, you get, you have to, you as a foreign state, I mean, this is just simple international law. You
Yes.
respect the laws that are already there. Whereas you have your stand, it is yours to come on board. It's simple ADR. Just basic.
That's why you
So
talk about the price
your
of
debate
non-interference.
holds no water from the very beginning.
No.
Anyway, it's okay. We shall get back.
Why?
Peter, we shall get back. We shall get.
I want to address this.
Okay.
Allow me to address this. So, we're a sovereign country, sure.
Yes.
America is a sovereign state.
Yes.
We pass a law
Yes.
and they withdraw funding for HIV/AIDS.
Their own funding.
Tell me, where is the sovereignty in that?
What is sovereignty?
That this is a state, this is a nation, it has its own politics, it has its own rulers, it has its own governance.
Ability
And
to
it has
decide
to
and
fund
do your
yes,
things.
It has funding. But if a state cannot fund its own health care and has to depend on another sovereign state,
All right.
Then why can't
Your
you-
argument, Preta, let's agree.
my argument is that it's a give and take. That there is a price to this interference.
But that is the relationship that the
they are
United
giving
States has
us-
created with very
that
many
they are
African
giving us
with very many
billions
African society, and that is why
in
Trump says,
medication.
and that's why Trump says, you're shithole countries. Shithole countries because one, you cannot even support the simplest and basic things that your country
That you
must
stand for.
provide for yourself.
A bit does not
Now
choice.
that
So are we
that
a
no
sovereign state? Are we a sovereign state? I want to answer this question of sovereignty. Because I'm saying it's a give and take.
Yes.
You interfere, they are interfering in our politics by funding our healthcare system. Do you know that? Because we can't. Our taxpayers' money cannot fund that. So they are interfering in our politics by funding all those Oblamo programs, by funding immunization, by giving us that money. So when we pass a law that they do not like and they withdraw that, it is part of the give and take process. That is why I'm calling it the price of non-interference. Because they are not interfering out of nowhere. If they had said, repeal the law, but they are giving us nothing, we would have laughed at them. We would have said, who do you think you are to tell us to do this? But we know who they are because they are giving us money. Because they are making our economy run. They are making our socio-economic services.
So let me ask you two questions. Just two. One, if they were not giving us the funding, would we still exist or not? Secondly, when Trump talked about shithole countries, what was your analysis of that?
We would exist, but we would be in a
No,
worse
let's take out the
state.
but.
We would be in
But you
a
would
worse
exist, right?
state.
You see, the beauty with being pushed to the corner is you can then use what was there. I mean, Libya had passed through that stage already. So this debate.
So you would
First
like
way, first
Uganda
way.
to be like Libya?
No. I'm telling you, Libya was at that corner before. You get. it was at that corner before. When Trump comes out and says you're shithole countries, it's just the same thing.
No,
he's telling
I would like you
So
to
that
expound
whole
on your
debate
Libya
of-
analogy.
Yes, I was telling
Yes,
you,
yeah.
way before. That's where Libya
Before
was.
Gaddafi, after
No, no, no.
Gaddafi.
After Gaddafi, it became a different story.
Yes. So where was Libya before Gaddafi?
Before Gaddafi, you know, they were already in that corner. So when
Which
you
corner?
push, come on.
Which corner?
Simple basic understanding that their development was not at that rate.
Okay.
It
There,
was a second world country before it was invaded.
Let me
by
ask
the
you, okay,
American
where
forces.
was Rwanda before the genocide?
It was like any other African country. It was like any other African country.
all right. Let's now first take back the debate and try to bring up the consequences here, because we're trying to understand. I'm trying to understand the consequences that, particularly the Trump win, means for African countries. The debate has been stagnant on the issue of shithole. Yeah,
Yes.
shithole and the consequences it has in terms of aid. But let's look at it from the perspective of business, entirely business. We are aware that Uganda is not, of course, privy. We are against cryptocurrency. But just 24 hours into the win of Donald Trump, particularly Bitcoin, is hitting almost 100K in just days, even before he's sworn in. That just shows you the surgence of business in terms of how it has improved and progressed. We also alive to the fact that there are quite particular tariffs that are going to be in place, with 60% being imposed on China and 10 to 20% on other nations. But I would just like to post this question to George and my brother Brian. And the Trump win, what does it mean for business for the African continent?
It's the cancer turning the firearms to my side. But I think we could not talk about the Trump presidency and not talk about business, actually. Because I think one of the key policy issues that even we're meant to discuss here, apart from shithole, possibly immigration, the economy, and all these other things that the Trump presidency actually brings in hindsight. And I think, just to take us a little bit back for 30 seconds, the MAGA movement, our good friend here, I don't know whether I misquoted her or just deliberately didn't look at it the way she looked at it, is that the MAGA movement aims, making America first great again, does not aim at closing out the whole world, not interfering, because actually America does not act in a vacuum. It acts with all these partners, Uganda inclusive. So making America great again will be actually, in essence, strengthening even partnerships beyond the USA, including Africa, because Trump's first presidency, actually, even during the trade war with China about the economy, was about making America sustainable to itself. And many very people would would make the Trump presidency look like it doesn't care about Africa, but in essence, it actually does, because as China's influence in Africa actually devolves, America under Trump's presidency is also looking at a way to counter that influence in Africa. And in the end, these are all partnerships that are going to be beneficial to Africa, because as you counter the infrastructure projects that China is doing here, you also have to increase aid in you have to show relevance in Africa.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a question to making America sustainable to itself.
To itself.
Yes. What does that mean for African imports to America?
African imports.
Yes.
I think even that's one of the things that are contentious that you mentioned that I don't believe with, because when you say that they're going to introduce a new tariff, a 10% tariff on all imports, and China 60%, I was reading of recent, and we send, I think, 80% of the imports that we send to America actually raw materials. And I was reading equally a research study just today morning, and it mentioned that even with the removal of AGOA, South Africa will only lose revenue of about 6.06%, because most of the things that it sends are actually raw materials in form of what? Of minerals. The 10% tariff tax is going to be on imported manufactured goods. And I don't think, to the least, we are going to be very much bothered as Africa, in a sense, bluntly to speak. So I think, in the end, for us, the tariff structure that is going to be released is, in a sense, going to be strong. Because for America to be sustainable, it actually needs these raw materials that are actually coming from Africa. But to go on from that point, the Trump presidency, like I've said, is a pragmatic one, a realistic one.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be, like Onen has been saying across the show, these things of strong arming us because of our culture beliefs and our society beliefs are not going to be there, because actually Trump doesn't care about those things. it's going to be a realistic give and take, that you're giving me this raw materials and I'm giving you that. You don't need to have a law against abortion. You don't need to have a law against this and this. So I think, as I conclude, I think in the end, the Trump presidency offers a new way for Africa, albeit with some concerns in as regards to cutting of funding, because Trump, like many of us know, is against these multinational treaties and organizations. So there's going to be, actually we're in presumptions because we don't know what is.
It's very unpredictable.
You understand?
Very unpredictable.
So we don't know what is actually going to what. All what we're saying, even some people hate him because of those presumptions, like my good friend here, and we don't know what is going to.
But the thing is, their idea, you guys want a script, the Democrats, because I know you are one. You guys want a script, someone who you would know their next move.
Isn't that the point of leadership?
No, it shouldn't be that. But anyway, I'll get back to it. As it winds up, no, you no.
Yes, I have a reply.
So, I think what I wanted to bring to the discussion still is that even under Trump's first presidency, he actually also single-handedly brought about projects that were aimed at developing and strengthening connections with Africa. So I think the Trump presidency, in a wrap-up in 10 seconds, offers new possibilities actually. And I want Council here to be very open-minded and objective and see how very many African presidents rushed to actually congratulate Trump.
You guys, that's diplomacy.
True.
If he died today, they would rush to also be like, oh, rest in peace.
Yes.
It's diplomacy.
True, it is. But it sends a message. It sends a message.
Even if Kamala Harris had won, they would still congratulate. Even if it was a tie, it's diplomacy.
Yeah.
You can't
I
just
think
say
lastly,
nothing.
my last 2 words would be that Trump is not going to strong arm us, that if you want a go, support homosexuality and all these things. So I think it offers new possibilities.
Preta, before you come, let's first listen from.
I have a reply to about the beliefs.
It's just take notes.
Do you guys
just
remember
allow me
the
to just
Muslim ban? Do you guys remember the Muslim ban?
Preta, if you don't
during
mind.
the first Trump presidency.
Preta.
Do you remember it? Do you remember it?
No.
Let Brian first come in and you'll come back on that point. Brian.
I think Council is still making very
Let her keep it.
Council is now convincing me to look at the other line, which I'm making. But to go back to the business perspective, I think it's on record that not all of us are perfect. Obviously, his presidency, this 47th term, that being the 47th president, it's maybe, let me say 50-50, and have some positives and have some negatives on the business aspects. You're already seeing China falling prey to that. But then it doesn't mean that midway, the game may not change. The world works in a funny way, and he already said that America doesn't work as a vacuum. You bring other state bodies on board, and she brought the whole aspect of diplomacy. That if an end passed through, it's in good faith that I do congratulate you.
Yeah.
In the same way that, God forbid, you pass one, the same way I'll still. But then you see again, it comes down to simple trade.
Yeah.
But if I'm in country A, and we had this debate before, saying that, and she, I don't want to misquote her, I've forgotten what she said. I wanted to quote it verbatim. But it's a simple saying, if I'm in country A, and country B has its goods in my country, when I pay a visit there, I also want to see my goods there. But then if it's an 80-20 relationship, I don't see how I benefit, because I'm having more of Drake's blood in my country in terms of business, but when I go to Onen's country, I'm seeing barely nothing. So I think him coming on board and saying, guys, look, let's do 60-20, and it's not from the point of view that he doesn't want them to thrive. He wants them to thrive, but he wants it. Let's first go back to the global scale. Let's give these guys a competitive market. Let's compete equally, and then we see, is it true that you guys did have that? But then now when you bring in the African question, I don't want to, I mean, both of them have made very great submissions, and I don't want to deviate from the whole aspect of imports, because that is very solid. But I think I want to believe that to the African businessman, business lady out there, especially the people in the business that has a lot of imports and exportation. I mean, the whole movement, because now like Uganda is landlocked, so you have to use Mombasa, and our rich friends like Council who like going through Tanzania. In good faith. Yeah, I think should have at a certain point, I think, a little self-belief and say, well, I think let's work up this, let's move down to investments, and then we see how the game moves.
All right. Preta, you had a response to that.
Yes, I had a response.
Even
No, mostly to him, but also to you too. So George talked about how Trump doesn't strong arm, countries and interfere with his beliefs. So I would like to introduce to you Executive Order 13,17769, titled "Protecting the Nation from Foreign Terrorist Entry into the United States." It was also titled "The Muslim Ban," whereby people from Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and people from Nigeria, Egypt, Liberia, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco couldn't easily enter the United States. As Christians, and what I would call a Christian country, because Uganda is predominantly Christian, we could mostly look at it as, we agree on anti-homosexuality, we agree on anti-abortion. But what about Trump's attitudes towards Muslims? And looking at it in the African perspective, as I've mentioned, Egypt, Algeria, Nigeria, Tunisia, Morocco, even Tanzania is a Muslim country. So if there is going to be another such ban, because remember, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. If there is going to be such another ban, how is business going to thrive for countries in Africa that are predominantly Muslim, or actually Islamic states like those in North Africa, when they can't, move freely between the borders?
But also, are you aware that in the campaigns he got an enormous support from the Islamic community in the United States?
He did. Let me tell you.
That just shows you a shift.
Yes.
That just shows you a shift. Yes. It's significant.
Yes.
An idea.
There's this concept whereby
but I didn't want to divide
people leave their countries and they're migrants, and then they reach there and then they're like, oh my God, I'm anti-immigration. E.g., Elon Musk, or in the UK, Kemi Badenoch. She's currently the leader of the Conservative Party. Those are great examples. But Trump and Muslims share one thing. What's that? They are both conservative. They're like, we should maybe hang gays, abortion is illegal. They're all conservative. But the Trump ban was very real. It was repealed, yes. But also a reply to him about the import and export. We have had Trump talk a lot about immigration. It was a big part of his campaign.
Illegal
migration.
Yeah. People who are there legally.
Illegal.
No, but that's in the fine print. That's in the fine print.
How?
You might be, legal and you overstay one day and something bad happens to you.
Yes. You're there.
So,
but Preta, just as to talk about immigration, let me use a simple analogy.
Yes.
A few weeks ago, we saw a documentary on one of the televisions about locals in Kansanga complaining about Eritrean Somalis that have taken over the business in the entities. Another case in point. You saw what happened in South Africa when the against
xenophobia against Nigerians, even
because taking the business. Similarly, the sentiment that is among the Americans is that people are coming out from other countries illegally and taking over the opportunities.
But even those who are legal,
even those who are legal.
Remember, in the case of the Haitian migrants in Springfield,
even those who are
they
legal,
were there legally.
and that is why the Trump idea. And that is why the Trump idea.
They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. We're referring to the immigrants from Haiti because of of all their natural disasters, who are now in Springfield, Ohio. That is JD versus, I guess I should call it constituency. And they were there legally.
It's all right. The point that I'm trying to make.
But there was sentiment that they should be deported.
The point that I'm trying to make, that even, the point that the issue here is, when you are a foreigner in a country, even as Ugandans here, we have sentiments. People who are around the areas of Kansanga, Kawalagala, have sentiments about.
Later note, one man said they even refused
But-
to get money.
That just
I
shows
saw
you.
that.
No,
But-
no, and that's
Are
the same
those
sentiment.
political sentiments held by
They
our
are
regime
socially,
in power?
they are socially, and that is why people in power must always represent the views of the
Yes.
people. Now, as I sum up and get to your point, the Trump idea that he presents right now, his idea against illegal immigration into the United States of America, I think it's a good one for Africa. Why? Why don't African states improve their own countries? Because that's essentially it. He's making America great because he's making America great for his people. Why can't African countries do the same? Why do you want, as Uganda, among your top 5 exports, as labor? And what kind of labor are you taking out?
Expatriation of profits.
Nonetheless,
That exists.
nonetheless,
Indians are in Uganda. They own all these businesses. All
and
these
they want to
factories.
become, they want to be
And-
recognized as a
and
tribe.
see-
Are you?
and you know
are you
what?
for that?
The Indians in Uganda, they're not making Uganda great. Okay, they're kind of making it great, but they are also making India great because they're expatriating those profits that they are making.
And that's the
here
Trump idea.
And taking them back.
That's the Trump idea. How many Mexicans are repatriating back the dollar they make into Mexico?
So, to speak about immigration, I'm going to talk about that Ugandan sentiment. Of course, there's been that sentiment. Ethiopians are taking housing from Ugandans. Somalis are making rentals and apartments expensive. That's what us little people think.
Yes.
That's not what the government that is in power thinks. If the government in power has such an idea, that if that is their sentiment, you know what we have? We have the Idi Amin ban on Indians. There's a difference between what we as ordinary people are feeling and what the government is implementing.
So Trump
You've
is
used a very
implementing-
wrong analogy, particularly on Idi Amin.
Yes.
Have you watched the speech of Idi Amin against, or why he had to send away the white man?
The Indians, the Asians.
The Asians
Yes.
and the British. Did you watch that clip?
But particularly the Asians. What did he say? Educated.
When I was talking about sending away
Yes.
the British, generally the white person.
The Asians, in particular, is my
And,
point. Because
okay,
they were citizens,
okay, Asians.
They were born here. Yes.
Okay, Asians.
Yes.
His rationale was, you have Ugandans who are naturally inhabitants of this country, being, subjected to very cheap labor and earning peanuts. Businesses in Nakasero, are all owned by the white person. And guess what? Were they employing us as people who are actually into the money economy? Definitely not. So his rationale was, go back to your country, let Ugandans take these opportunities. Yes, there are issues that there could be pros and cons, but that was his argument.
Yes.
And he was the
And
person
that
in
was
power.
a very unsound argument because as soon as I deported those Asians, the factories began to collapse.
And that is
You know,
why I
he
said
put
you've
here-
used a very wrong analogy for the argument they're trying to
Asians were
make.
here legally.
Yeah.
Some of them were born here. Sudir was born here, but was alive by then.
Yeah.
Had already begun his business. But they had they had to go to Kenya, they had to go to the UK to escape this ban. But also to leave alone that, I think these stances on immigration dehumanize people. It, as you said, Amin said,
It's a question of
natural-born-
leadership,
natural-born-
Preta.
natural-born African.
It's a question of leadership, in my opinion. And I think all the panelists would agree. Simply, why don't your leaders improve your countries to have your citizens stay?
We are living in a global economy.
It's okay,
But,
but
on
improve
on the point of dehumanization, once a certain group of people has been dehumanized, once you are saying they are eating the cats and the dogs, they're here illegally, they are not actually eating those cats and dogs. You create a system of violence towards them. I don't know if you saw it in the news 2 to 3 months ago in the UK. It was in the news that a certain young man of Rwandese descent had stabbed
children.
3 children, I think. They were in a dance studio.
There were 9
And-
and 3 past
3 past 20 years. And it caused, unrest.
Islamophobia.
So there was a building where immigrants were staying,
Touched.
and they went there and locked the doors and set the building on fire. That's the price of those sentiments. It creates an us versus them. And like in the UK, it's different. In the UK, white people, they are the natives. If you are black, if you're Asian, it means you recently went there. But in the United States, it's different. There have been Latinos living there since the 1960s, 1950s, and they are now localized. Then there are the African slaves who have been there since the 1800s. So if the president says they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, and me, maybe a white Republican, goes into the streets, I live in Spring Hill, Ohio, and I see a black person, I won't know if they are Haitian and they're eating cats or dogs, or if they're African American. And I might be prompted to commit a hate crime against them. That's the dehumanization I'm talking about. And I'm going to contrast what the UK did and what the US did in such instances. Once those people who were involved in the burning of that hotel, the cameras caught their faces, they were arrested, they were charged, and the majority of them are now serving their sentences in prison. Their government took a stance against it and were like, we are not standing for that, we're not standing for the hate. They might be here illegally, that doesn't mean you're going to burn them alive in that hotel.
I get the argument that you're trying to raise. And maybe because the idea that a leader, you should possibly present a neutral point of view. That the argument that you go ahead and say because we have illegal immigrants and they have people already settled in that country of that descent, everyone would then be inclined to think that anyone from, let's say, if you see a black person on the streets of New York, they're definitely an immigrant. And it creates a sentiment that is somewhat wrong. I totally agree with you on that point because yes, it would it will lead to the argument that you raised.
Yes.
But also let us look at it maybe as I sum up and bring in George. The angle that this presents, the positive side in terms of the leadership question. Illegal immigration is definitely unacceptable. International law, national law, it's not right. That is why I think in terms of consequences and in terms of in terms of the consequences on the African countries like in Uganda, among others, then the leadership needs to improve its own internal doings to let the people not travel elsewhere. That, in that particular point, is what we're trying to look at. But yes, your argument is also right.
As you hand over to George, I would like him to weigh the pros and cons of illegal migration.
Illegal immigration?
Yes.
Please go ahead. Respond to that and I'll give you a question.
The pros and cons. I don't think I would divert to, because even it was an example that I wanted to use. Because what you have today, and Preta actually wants you to believe that the great number of American people actually believe the things that you actually say.
They do.
They do.
But all of them are immigrants. They are actually British immigrants.
Yes, this is what I'm trying to say.
On the Native
That,
Americans.
on the native, what I'm trying to say is that an enormous number of Americans, and it was reflected in the vote, that they actually care about people who come and work for cheap labor.
True.
You understand? Because they take on the jobs of the natives. Onen gave a very clear example.
I would also like
Should I respond?
a question to that. The Hispanics, they do that cheap labor, they're working in the fields.
At the expense of.
But do the Americans want that labor?
No, they want it, albeit
They
at
want it?
at a higher price.
Okay.
Yes, and because it's a cheaper option, that's why they lose out on those jobs actually.
Isn't that the entire concept of capitalism?
The
Free
entire
market
concept.
economy?
No, but we're trying to make America great again, that they can afford.
So we are now being communists?
No, we're not communists. We are not.
What happens to
We
free
are not.
markets?
We are not.
The
What
cheaper
I'm trying
labor,
to
the
say-
better for the, for the
listen to what I'm
capitalists,
trying
yes.
to say, Preta, is that the idea, and I'll resonate with what Onen mentioned earlier in the example he mentioned, that the sentiments of the people in Kansanga are that when you come here, you take over the jobs that you actually could have what? Could have done. You
But
understand?
mostly about housing, but yes.
No, even the jobs, I think you watched the later one, but these sentiments have not come this year.
Yes.
They've been here for some time.
Yes.
And then I would want you to reflect that and put it on the American population.
Yes.
That you have a person who came from Haiti, not those legal, because I've equally watched the documentary where
They're
business
illegals
owners,
too?
where and they're illegals too, where the business owners have said we thank for the people coming here, because even in some states actually there's no more labor. And
Yeah.
people capitalize on this labor that is what is
Coming in, yes.
but doesn't reflect on all the 50 states in what
Yes.
in America. That's why the immigration laws are actually tough. And part of what I said is that you don't have to look at America in a vacuum. You know that immigration has been a great campaign thing across Europe, and Trump is a product of actually some of the things that are going on. You understand? Populists, Trump is a populist actually
He
because
is,
it speaks to the sentiments of the people. they win because of the problems that have been failed failed the current leadership to fix. The Biden, Kamala, because they failed to fix on the immigration problem.
Listen.
And that's why
Go
today
on, yes.
you have you had Bolsonaro in Brazil as a president. You have
Yes.
Meloni as a president
Mhm.
in Italy, and you have confusion in the German parliament because of some of those things. They come because of those issues that have been failed to fix. Have failed to be
fixed. Yes.
That's why populists come into power.
Yes.
You understand?
Could you talk about the pros of immigration in the American context?
But I gave a pro of immigration. I told you that some states
Yes.
where there's been no labor, and because these people have come,
That's the only pro you can think about?
that's the only one I have. You want to give me another?
Okay.
All right, let me just quickly get to Brian. Foreign policy and defense. An area that I think it's very, very quite interesting for us Africans who recently know what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. When you talk about foreign policy, maybe an ordinary Ugandan would think, okay, what did the US do? They all know that the US killed Gaddafi. Yeah, and that is what maybe most Ugandans think. But we first need to understand, what is United States foreign policy anyway? And maybe that's something you need to first bring us up to speed. And maybe after understanding the foreign policy, we then can relate it to the consequences it can have on our continent. Yeah.
Thank you. I think to begin it off is by the basic understanding of policies, the formulations and how things work, even based in your country or institutions. But then secondly, I think, in my view, completely my view, I think the whole foreign policy of the United States of America, will be specific to the 47th, will be again to re-uplift America to where it's supposed to be. Same as any other nation would push for it. To people who think that its policy is all about killing this and that,
It isn't?
it goes beyond what meets the eye.
Yeah.
Can't say smiling. It goes to what goes beyond the eye. Now, for example, on the business scale, I think it's to uplift their people back to an equal scalability of competition in a competitive market. That's why you're seeing China being put at that other level. Two, socially, I think it's to bring, I want to call it, I don't know if it's a right word, but I think to bring back the lost glory. I don't know how Democrats term it.
What does the lost glory include?
I'm coming to that.
Okay, yes.
I'm coming to that.
Yeah, the lost glory. Oh.
But cancel.
I'm sorry for interjecting.
I think coming back to the basic, that this is a country that was that was shaken up on the basis of the Christianity thing. Because most recently, not most recently, a couple of years back, you've seen funny colors coming around, and gentlemen saying, I think as conservatives we need to first go back to that line. I think it's bringing back the whole normal behavior thing of you thinking as a human. I mean, and not getting into whatever. I fail to understand the whole term of the vocabulary, things like that in a funny color. I'm not very certain about the education part, and so I'll leave that to council to break on that. But then now coming to international relations. First of all, I must say I'm very happy that his chief of staff is going to be a lady. I think this is a lady that has proved to be worth, because if you see people like Trump, as I said before, we are not all very perfect people. I think this is a gentleman who has mainly rallied on the male gender to push, because I think he believes, this guy is fast, they're reliable and what. So by the time another person comes in the circle, then that means you are equally at that place. Not that he has brought you in because of gender equality, no. He has brought you in because of what you're capable
Competence.
of doing. Yeah, competence based.
Merit.
And yes. So whereas, yes, he's, I think this lady is going to...
She's smiling. I know she was like, I think you made a sexist argument there. But
Actually, Trump is surrounded by many women, Marjorie Taylor Greene, etc.
Yeah.
But their intelligence is questionable, so there's that. She didn't graduate from high school, she has a GED. So when you bring up the point of merit, And you know,
That's
these
very
are
cool.
his.
Of merit
I
of the
mean,
chief of staff.
no.
She was a campaign manager.
He was talking about her, but I'm talking about, you know, the other women, you know,
No,
Trump's
but
inner
I think
circle.
I was very specific
Yeah,
to...
yeah.
But they all add something under that.
Nonetheless, they're still.
They bring one vibes.
Yeah, so I think she's going to be very key. So I think the whole aspect of their foreign affairs, the international relations, it's going to come down now again to that office, that docket. So I would want to pray that African countries, especially Uganda to be specific, play the good person to begin with, so that you understand how this relationship could go sour. You know, because I don't know if the speaker actually made the remarks.
She did.
She really did.
Pelosi?
No.
No, not
Anita
Nancy
Among.
Pelosi.
Anita Among.
Because I saw, you know why I'm questioning is because I'm a Ugandan and memes usually, news comes faster through memes, so I was very questionable as to whether the speaker said that
What did you
since Donald Trump is
Sanctions are
president,
gone.
sanctions would, she really said that.
I read it on one of the Kenyan.
Yeah,
Well,
because I read
she'll
it.
now at least stop trying to get her for corruption because of homosexuals. She'll at least stop saying that.
Yeah, why I say that, why I'm bringing that is, it's not a good thing to rush into making comments that, oh, since she's the AG, me as Brian, everything that I did is going to be taken off. No, first keep it calm, see how other nations are going to, because you know there's a difference between someone winning based on something they said and then implementation. So I really think that since the thing is 4 years, first give it 2 years, see how other countries are going to. If you see the trend is taking that way, then it's easier for you to say, oh, look, I think we need to push for collaboration, sit down with the person and make the person understand, or their team, because you may not meet with the person, sit with the team and then understand. It comes down to the whole foreign affairs, how diplomacy works. One country, another country, you see it, it's a 50-50 at the end of the day.
True.
I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
Speaking of appointments, as you all know, Trump's presidency had the highest turnover rate of ministers and all of that in the history of the United States. And during his campaign, you know, he dropped hints that him and J.D. Vance are not in cahoots together. You know, he was like, oh, I don't meet with J.D. or don't know what J.D. is saying. So regarding these appointments, how well do you think Trump is going to gel with these people he's bringing in, or should we expect a redo of 2016 to 2020, whereby people are being fired within 3 months?
Well, okay, thank you. I think firing, it comes down again to competence. If I bring Drake on board, and I know Drake stands for A, B, C, and D, and is capable of doing A, B, C, and D, then I expect that till the end.
Okay.
If midway, let me take this off the United States. If when we started the 15th Guild Cabinet at Cavendish, there are people I appointed because I knew, okay, from what I thought I knew, is that they were good. 1 month down the road, I got them moving.
So you're saying that
Because
you're a decision maker?
No. So
Okay.
decision making, you see, it's about the people, because you see, this is a gentleman now who has come in,
Yeah.
47th, the 7 swing states, the popular vote, everything.
Yeah.
He has passed through. So it is very courteous that you serve people as per the same thing you gave them, the same hope. You see, like Cavendish, for example, when we came in, we came from a time of people passing through and opposed around 3-4 cabinets. So when we came in and were widely voted, the pressure is a lot. So when one person of the team delays or fails putting the same input, work goes down. You leave Ugandan jokery. Guys need to move. So if you're to be sacked, reevaluate yourself, let the country be moving forward. So I think at the later stage, when you come back to speed, you'll join the team.
I just wanted to say that some of those people were fired because they asked them to do illegal things and they refused.
You know that?
Yes, it's fact.
Not on
All right.
It's
You
fact.
can ask her.
We will ask you,
she's-
what's your sauce?
Legacy.
My senior counsel.
We
So
will ask
some
you,
things are
what
fact.
sauce?
Legacy.
I'll bring up the
All right, let's just quickly go for a short break.
Oh, an example before we go for a short break.
Yeah.
Mike Pence, the vice president during Trump's regime, he asked, the assumption was that, you know, since this is his vice president, that Pence wouldn't allow that Biden has won. But Pence was like, Biden won the election. And if you're familiar with the imagery from the January 6 riots, at the Capitol they brought a gallows and they had an effigy, like, you know, a doll of Mike Pence, and his supporters were going to hang Mike Pence. Actually, in Republican circles, Pence is still referred to as a traitor.
Anyway,
but that's basic. The elections showed that it's Donald Trump won.
Elections.
anyway, guys, let's just quickly go for a break. We shall come back and evaluate what the democracy in the United States looked like and what it could also possibly pose for us African countries as we gear towards elections. Just stay with us as we go for a short break. See you shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break. Just before we went into the break, we were discussing the US elections and its consequences on the African continent. Just before we went into the break, we were discussing the foreign policy and its consequences it has on the continent. And my brother Brian highlighted what he thinks, and he says that the current administration, the Trump administration that will be sworn in on 20th, I think, of January, will definitely manifest the idea of making America great. But I'd like to get to you, George. Foreign policy in terms of peace, international peace. Trump has pledged, and just we saw 24 hours later, the troops in Ukraine have been withdrawn. And we know that the war in Ukraine has had a very great effect on Africa in terms of particularly wheat. And we know how we're a continent that consumes a lot of wheat, and that war has greatly affected us in terms of the supply for wheat, but also in other avenues as well. So what does the foreign policy that Trump intends to present mean in terms of international peace to the continent, but also globally?
Thank you very much, Onen. I think, first of all, we shall draw back to what one statement that Trump mentioned in his campaign when he said that in power he can end the war in 24 hours. I think that's one of his most famous remarks. But like I mentioned earlier, I would also want to draw back to, because the person we're talking about was actually president before. He was president from 2016 to 2020. So even some of the things that he did then can actually, in a sense, cement what he's going to do in the leadership that is in the instant. And like we've been discussing all around, and I think even why we're actually discussing the election of the USA is that inadvertently, whether we want it or not want it, it affects us. It affects us. And like I mentioned earlier, that USA is, some commentators have called it the police of the world. It has had post-World War II, post-World War I, when USA established itself as a superpower, very many people have been looking at it in a sense as a power broker to make amends where warring factions have not been able to make amends, to sort of come in and rein in as, in a sense, a peace broker. So the coming of a second-term Trump presidency, and we all know, and he has famously been on record, that during his presidency there was no existence of some of these things. From war, corner to corner of the world, there's war here, there's war the other side, and I think those are some of the things we have missed in the Biden presidency. A sort of a dominant figure, a bully figure that can actually put these people on table to make them talk and sort out these things before they spread out into these big wars that we have been able to see. And these issues that we're talking about are some of the reasons actually that Kamala Harris and the joint campaign with Tim Walz actually won. They are critique on how they have handled some of these things. Because when you go back home in America, some of the sentiment is that you're continuing to pump into a lot of money into the Ukrainian war. You're giving aid to Ukraine in billions of dollars. And that continuing to see the sentiment is that we are not seeing why we're actually putting this money there. Why don't you just find a lasting solution to the war and make sure that it gets done so that you don't waste our taxpayers' money into the Ukraine? So there's no, and even I think I would still believe, I may be wrong, but I will still believe that actually for the sustenance of the American dream, or to cut down on taxpayer expenditure, there's a need to find a solution to the Ukrainian war so that it can actually what? It can actually end. Mm. On how it will end and on how Trump is going to handle that, excuse me, I see there's a lot of discussion that I think that needs to go into that, because as a student of international law, I would also presume, and I would also think that some of the acts that actually Russia is doing are actually illegal in as regards to invading a sovereign state and all these other things, and NATO and all that. But on how it is going to be fixed, I think we shall let that to be. And I think even globally, like I mentioned earlier, even during Trump's first presidency, there were a lot of efforts because the sustenance of America as a peaceful nation depends on how the world is actually is. The attack on the January 9/11 attack was because there was rising terrorism across the board, and in the aftermath there's been deliberate effort, even during the Trump presidency, to support missions like AMISOM in Somalia to make sure that some of these things actually stay where they are. Supporting Nigeria to fight the Boko Haram. Trump was famous for targeting some of the Islamist groups in Iran and all these other countries. So Trump's, and I think even one of the biggest things that America owes to the world actually is to make sure that the world is peaceful, corner to corner, because right now, as we are right now, and why I wanted actually Trump to win is that corner to corner, the world is actually in turmoil. So there's need actually to have a peaceful means to some of these things that are happening.
Definitely. We need international peace. And I think the right person for the job at the moment is Donald Trump.
Whether we want it or not want it. That's the solution that we have. Yes.
You talked about the Ukrainian troops, about the troops withdrawing from Ukraine. What's your news source? Is it happening, or is it in the pipeline?
It's in the pipeline. It's a pledge that he made that his administration is to go ahead and ensure that the troops in Ukraine are withdrawn.
It's a pledge.
Yes.
So it hasn't been done.
And it will happen.
Okay.
Because because if you're to study the relationship between Trump and Putin, it was one that was cordial, and it is one that wasn't existent with Biden, nor was it with Obama. And if you had to go ahead and read and even watch, Putin preferred to work with Donald than Obama or Biden. So that just tells you that there's a possibility that even with the ideologies that Donald Trump holds on issues to do with foreign policy, international peace, it's going to manifest, and it was in his manifesto.
So I would like to relate what you're saying with, MAGA, Make America Great Again, because if we look at America, when it became great, 60s, 70s, 80s, a big highlight of that was the Cold War.
Yes.
The tensions between the US and Russia. Actually, if you look at the Trump campaign, a lot of the policies of Kamala and Walz were called communist. So, this is to you, Trump supporters. How does making America great again fit into with being kind of allies with Russia and Putin?
But
go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I hope hopefully the answer I give is satisfying. You must understand that these people have been rivals since I think since the post-World War, post-World War, Second World War, and I think at the level of equals that I'd want to presume Russia and the USA is, because when their rivalry was at the peak, it was actually not well with the world. people were going around sponsoring proxy wars here and there in different parts of the country. And because the rivalry was not sustainable at that level, there was need to make peace. And part of, like I said earlier, I don't know whether it's you misunderstanding the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement is not aimed at creating enemies. It's actually meant to make sure that America is sustainable, even with the powers that be, because they're actually fine. If America was to go on through a full throttle war with China today, regardless, albeit it may win, but it would also come at a cost with America. So having two enemies, they are enemies, yes, they're enemies, USA and Russia, but they shouldn't be in all-out war. I think that's the main point that I'm trying to make. That it's best that we know, me and council are disagreeing, but let us just be at that level. Let it just be there, like that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it's not reminiscent of the America that was great. I don't know if you get my point.
But the America was great, didn't have any other power that across the globe, it didn't have.
It had power,
yes.
But that
the
era was
right
characterized by the Cold War, by those tensions. And, you know, they're now allies. Under this regime, they are going to be allies.
Under this regime,
with Russia.
Who says that?
Onen says that, don't you say
no,
so?
But I wanted you to make a distinction. I told you some of the comments that you may make are not representative of what necessarily the campaign team of Trump. Has he ever come out openly and said he's going to be an ally to Russia? No, he has never said that. Has he ever said that?
During the campaign, he talked about, you know, him being friends with Kim Jong-un and Putin.
Actually,
yes.
I remember during an interview, when Putin was asked, he said he's comfortable working with Kamala Harris. Did you see that?
Yes, I saw that.
Did you see it? Putin openly, the president of Russia, said he is better off working with Kamala. But you guys don't want to listen to that.
Anyway.
You haven't answered my question, but let's proceed. My question isn't answered, but let's proceed.
Okay, Preta, energy strategy. The climate activists are frustrated with the Trump win. Extremely frustrated.
Okay, it's a discussion on COP29.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a climate activist?
Unfortunately. But
I'm not a climate activist.
But you're saying that it means you ally yourself with Trump's ideology.
No.
Climate change is a hoax.
And he doesn't believe in climate change.
So you just don't support it or you don't believe in it?
It's not something, I know climate change exists, but it's not something I've really focused on so much. So it's my area of expertise.
All right. So since
I would like to answer your question still.
Yes. Okay, the energy strategy. You know, with the Biden administration, they went ahead and put in place delays on permits for fossil production. And among the in his manifesto, he talks about removing those delays on permit on those fossil production permits. But also remember, in his era when he was the 45th president, 2016-2020. He went ahead and withdrew United States from the Paris Agreement, which I think is going to be the same when he gets back. And so, that's a conversation that I would like us to hold, because Africa is a country that has been greatly, a continent that has been greatly affected with climate change, particularly not our actions. And that is why we have this conversation of climate justice. Our actions too, yes, but greatly we have a very minimal contribution to the effect of that climate change has upon us. But bottom line is, United States is amongst the biggest carbon emitters in this world. And United States, meaning withdrawing from the Paris Agreement and among others, has a great impact. And the Trump win means the activists are going to go ahead and rant them all. So what does this mean for our continent in terms of the effects that we're experiencing?
So the biggest Trump supporter, I guess you can call him a climate activist. True or false?
Oh.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk.
He makes electric cars, green energy. Anyway,
but
so
rockets.
During...
And the same Elon Musk says we still need the energies that we use now because we can't transition at once.
So during his campaign, Trump talked about banning green energy and all, these cars, these electric cars, majorly in California. That's where most of the EVs are being made. He said that he's doing so because he wants to protect car manufacturers. Car manufacturers in the US are some of the biggest employers, you know, Ford, Chrysler, and all of that. So his base, his fan base, most of them, you know, high school graduates, factory workers, and all of that. So that was his pledge to them. But then hereby comes Elon Musk. I haven't looked into his beliefs into climate change, but by the mere fact that he runs the world's biggest company that makes electric vehicles, Tesla, means he's looking towards bringing about a future whereby we leave behind fossil fuel and focus on electric energy. So I think there was kind of a divide in the campaign. I think Trump was saying what the particular group of people he was meeting wants to hear. You know, he's meeting with workers. He says, oh, we are going to abolish EVs. He's meeting with the billionaire climate change car manufacturer, and he's like, all right, I'm going to give your company tax cuts. So I think that's still a wild card. But in relation to Africa, yes, the manufacturing in all these developed countries affects us. But if we look at the climate conditions locally, I don't think the help we need in terms of climate change needs to come outside of Africa. This is a place where we need the non-interference, maybe. We have seen deforestation. I don't think Uganda still has a big forest. If you use the eastern route, you can see that maybe that has been depleted. You can see that they're building in swamps in Kampala. That's why during the rain season, all the roads are flooded because the water has nowhere to go. So those are not things that we have to look to the West for solutions. Those are solutions we can create for ourselves.
So, true.
Yes.
All right. This question, I think I'd like to engage Brian. The market and economic sector in terms of growth. It was still related to the business, but this is now market and economic growth. Looking at the market that the US creates in terms of taking in our coffee, among others. You know, recently the president went ahead and applauded the NRM MPs for rationalizing UCDA. And United States is amongst the biggest consumers of our coffee. So what does this mean for the coffee farmer with the Trump win in terms of market for our coffee?
Thank you. To begin with, I want to believe that the market between Ugandan exporters, because at that stage you're an exporter, and then the American market would be regardless of administration, whether Trump, whether Kamala Harris, whether Biden. Reason is, if there is tariff A on a certain product, that is the tariff that is there. So regardless of the administration, maybe if under Trump's administration we're going to have maybe a little percentage cut on those things, because one, you already said that they have a high percentage of especially coffee consumption, which is true. And so when you're looking at the economic growth and the details that fall in after, you already said during the first quarter of the discussion that when Trump came in, I mean, we all followed this, the cryptocurrency world, you know, saw a lot of improvement. But then also that means that you're looking at the business sector, people in the business sector are saying, oh, actually, I think we're going to make a kill in this administration. So when you get people happy, especially the business end, when you get people happy on the business end, I want to call it patriotism. They become very patriotic.
True.
Now, when you have that caliber of people sorted out, it's a very easy one to have a much quicker growth. Reason is, except for Uganda and a few other countries that are, I think, exceptions to this rule, most nations are driven by the backbone of the middle class or the backbone of the economic class. It's the business sector. It's because it's the business sector that again pumps. Because without the business sector, this whole conversation of taxes, what becomes baseless. And then without that, again, you have governments falling back, which in the long run puts us to the discussion she was bringing that, oh, you guys are calling yourselves sovereign, but look, you can't even fund yourselves. So, but then that comes down again to the basics. The challenge is that some things need to be said off air. But the challenge is that, you see, when you come down to a country where would be now pushing for these guys to, if Onen has business A, needs to be at that level, is we are still having a sector of, a portion of MPs fighting for chairs, then others are, musicians and whatever people are doing that is unethical. But at that level, we are supposed to be looking at empowering, our own local citizens in the business sector. Leave politicians and whatever they are thinking. Empowering the business. So you now come down to the coffee farmers. Say, guys, look, here is A, B, C, and D. The global market is saying this. We are saying this. Can we look at the standards? What standards are we at? Is it possible to push them further so that when our coffee reaches there, the level of discussion is different? Guys, those of you who are into the fashion industry, how can we push it to be at another level? You get? So by the time our product A goes to the United States, there is some respect that is put to it. Now, you do not want to, I wouldn't think that under the Trump administration, they will just allow for to enter.
But mostly what we've been exporting has entirely been raw material. We have not been exporting any finished or value-added product as much.
Your raw materials.
Yeah, which is bad, but we still have the market anyway, because if coffee is our second biggest import generating raw material at this point in the country, then it says so much.
True.
Yeah.
But then if that quality of the coffee also goes down, we lose the market.
True.
So you don't want to say that, oh, since, it's the same way we're saying allegedly that the Right Honorable Speaker came out and said, well, since His Excellency President Donald Trump has passed through the sanctions bill, if you want to sustain, it's just a simple thing in entrepreneurship and in business, that keep the customers you have while getting more. Let's keep the market that we have, but let's increase on the quality so that we have more market. Because with the United States, you're playing with not only the natives, but then also people that have come in. So you're playing with a country that has above 50 nationalities in. It is very easy for them to recommend back in their countries that, okay, I think there is coffee, there is this product. It's not even just about coffee, but there is product A, B, C, and D. And you say, oh, which country does it come from? So then people will come and look for partnerships and all this. It's cordially, it brings about the market growth that you're saying, both at the external level of the states and the internal level. Secondly, employment opportunities. If my company, so good wishes, grows, I'll have to then get more people working in. So Italia, you're solving a number of issues, but hitting one stone. So I do pray that we will be at that stage of discussion.
All right. At this point, we've reached towards the end of our conversation. So I'll just quickly, I'll begin with you to just wrap up the show. You give us your concluding remarks and your last statement.
Thank you. Obviously, I do want to wish His Excellency Donald Trump, though he doesn't know me, success in this term, and to call upon our diplomats, especially those who will be serving in the United States of America, to really do good. And secondly, to our politicians in the country, especially those who are appointed in high-level positions, to portray the country, to portray and also do good. Reason is we don't want to be ashamed again of diplomats being put in the persona non grata standard, because the US is a big player. Yes, we are in a global village, but there is always, in a family, there is always the decision maker in the family. The United States is at that level. So I would request that our Ugandan community, we do embrace, yes, we do get to know the foreign policy of the United States, where it stands. We then understand our foreign policy. Then we see how to build the rapport, a good rapport in between.
Thank you. Preta.
I would like to talk about how that foreign policy is going to impact our
You can do that, and then
business.
your closing remarks.
So we are looking at Uganda and Africa as a country and as a continent that is in a state of stagnation. Because when we say that all the tariffs won't affect us, because we are exporting or importing raw materials, it means we are not growing. It means that we see ourselves next year, 4 years from now, still importing to other countries raw coffee beans, meaning we are seeing ourselves as not as manufacturers, but just as mere farmers. I don't think that's a good outlook. So potentially, if Uganda, say, was to develop an industry that makes its own coffee, that manufactures its own coffee, we would still run into problems importing this coffee to the United States because of these tariffs. Actually, there are already companies, I don't know if you guys have seen those fancy coffee packets they sell in the supermarkets. They're really expensive. Many of those are exported to the US. So already I think that's going to be a challenge. Also, finally, I would like to say that a strict immigration policy poses challenges to business.
Yeah.
Yes, because once they put those policies in place where they say we don't want people from Africa flooding into our country and all of that, currently we can see that traders, these guys who sell clothes and all that merchandise that is popular in Kampala, they go to India, they go to China, they collect their merchandise and bring it here to sell because it's somehow easier to enter those countries. But we see it's already hard for Africans to enter the United States. Attaining that visa isn't something easy. So if they put in place stricter immigration controls, we would only have to use shipping through the ocean and all of that. It would be hard to do what we call oksupla, whereby we have Ugandans going to the US and they pick merchandise and they bring it back here and all of that. But yeah, I think the Trump administration is a wild card. I think he won't actually do some of the things he said he would do.
Yeah.
But I hope their economy remains good, because when things are good for the US, they are good for the rest of us. Yeah.
All right. George.
Yes, thank you very much, Onen, and to all. It has been quite insightful. And I think conclusively, I think like she has said, it gives us a wild card. It gives us actually two options. If Trump goes the way I think he would go, then everything shall be at par as to how the things are going to move. But nonetheless, I think the biggest take from this discussion is that of recent, I was watching immediately after the win actually of Trump on the 6th, President Macron in France called for an emergency, I think, European Union engagement, and it was attended by dignitaries and presidents from all over Europe. And one of the major discussions was, because Trump, like I mentioned earlier, is a president that is not a lot in these multilateral agreements and organizations, the EU, and even in his first presidency was called on to the US distancing itself from some of those things, and even his stance on Ukraine. So we're discussing all those things. And in one of the agendas of the meeting was that Europe in and itself should start thinking about ways in which it could thrive even without the US. So they start thinking of ways in which they could grow on their own, on which they can sustain themselves. And I think conclusively, there's also need, like Council said, that Africa in itself, because we have even a very big market even within our 55 countries in Africa. So things like the AfCFTA, the African Continental Agreement, those are things that can actually be actualized. If there's fear that Trump is going to cut down on AGOA, cut down on USAID and all these things, so there's need, like we mentioned in this show, for African countries and our leaders to wake up and actually start doing some things, because we can't continue, like Preta said, to depend on the US. So there's need for us to grow. So I think that is those are the two windows that we must look into these things. We don't have to be lazy, because if Trump goes the other way, like Preta said, things are actually going to be bad for us. So we need to grow our own selves.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, George, Preta, and Brian, for the wonderful submissions you've given us and guided the debate. It's been wonderful and interesting. Thank you. And to our dear esteemed viewers, thank you for staying with us. To the technical crew, Ronald, Brittany, and Paul, for making this possible. Civic Space TV and Center for Constitutional Governance for bringing this to us. Otherwise, I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.